Hello and welcome. I'm Rosie Carr, editor of Investors Chronicle, and I'm joined today by Deborah Meaden, the highly successful entrepreneur and businesswoman and long-standing member of the Dragon's Den TV show. Welcome, Deborah, to the Future of Private Investing event, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you for
You
inviting
are
me.
very well known. You're very well known for Dragon's Den. You've also written a book sharing your common sense rules aimed at investors and businesses, and you are passionate about sustainability and protecting the environment. And in fact, this is at the heart of your podcast series, which is called The Big Green Money Show. We'll come back to that issue of sustainability and capitalism in a little bit. First, I would like to focus on you as an investor. There are lots of parallels between investing in the listed arena and in private unlisted companies, and I think everyone watching would like to hear more about your success and learn from that. So I'm particularly interested to know if there are areas that you won't invest in. Now, Warren Buffett, for example, has always stressed the value of understanding the business that you're investing in, and that makes a lot of sense from the point of view of being able to see the risks and understand the potential. So are there particular sectors that you like to focus on, or will you invest in anything if it's a good idea?
I think it's fair to say that there are certainly sectors I wouldn't invest on in terms of they don't fit with my values. I wouldn't invest in tobacco businesses. I wouldn't invest in sort of anything connected to fossil fuels. So, there's definitely an ethical background that sits behind any of my investment decisions. But I say I don't have to be an expert in something. I don't have to understand the technical issues of a business, but I do have to understand why or its reason to exist. Why is it here? What is the market? And not just is it what size is the market, and is it a long term? Is it a market with a future? So that's what I really spend most of my time thinking about. Once I've got past the values thing, does it fit with my values? And do I honestly understand its reason to be? If I don't get that, then I can't invest.
Okay, so have you invested in technology companies, for example?
Well, I have actually. In fact, I'm often an early investor, and people don't think of me in that way as an early investor in technology businesses. But even in the den, I mean, about 12 years ago, I invested in the first online antiques valuation business. That was really cutting edge because at the time the whole industry was terribly traditional, and trying to get people to migrate from sort of physical valuation to online valuation. I mean, it was hard work to do. As it happened, it turned into a big success. So yes, I'm definitely up for technological solutions, and also
Okay.
understanding how businesses migrate into that online space.
Yeah, it seems so normal now, but as you say, back then it was really a very different concept. Why do you think we don't have such a big tech sector in the UK? This is one area that's really separated the US and the UK in the past 2 decades. They have the world's most successful technology companies, Apple, Microsoft, Google, and we don't. Do you
Well,
understand why that is the case?
it's kind of self-proliferating, of course, because sort of LA and the whole tech arena has settled itself in the US. And once you start getting big giants that are seen as really cool innovators, it kind of attracts all of the talent as well, because I see a lot of British technology, supremos actually going over to LA because they don't really see the environment here. And I think, as I say, it's just got itself onto a sort of an upward spiral. LA is the place to be. It's where it's all going. It's very, very vibrant. Whereas I think we're seeing a little bit more as sort of a physical, more traditional style investment in the UK. So it isn't that we don't have some fantastic people. I just think that they look over the pond and think, oh, that's a really exciting place to work.
Yeah, yeah. Maybe then there are other areas that we can excel at in future, for example, in sustainability and green energy.
Well,
Just on that
we should
issue of tech
definitely own that
companies,
space.
yeah. Obviously, it's important to do due diligence. I think a lot of new investors get swept up in a very exciting business story. They just don't pay enough attention to looking behind the idea. They hope for the best. So, can you tell us a bit more about the sort of information or research that you would do before investing in a company? What are the key things you want to know to understand the business and the potential for growth?
Well, the first thing I have definitely learned is, you always get every single business deck you ever get gives you 1,001 reasons why this is going to be the business going forward. So, and it makes a huge, they always make huge, huge claims. So the first thing I look for are the gaps in their claims. So what are they not telling me? What there are always downsides and difficulties and hurdles for every single business. And if a deck doesn't include that, here are the risks. I think, either you haven't paid attention to that or you're not telling me about it, because it is very, very worrying. So I like to see a deck that talks about the round. Here's the opportunity, here's the real risk within that business. I due diligence the people themselves. I want to know what their background looks like. I want to know who they associate themselves with. It's really important when I get into business with people that I can trust them. So that's really important to me. And then it's no different to everything, verifying information. If somebody's told me something, I'm afraid I have learned you can't take it at face value. Nearly every single business pitch or every single deck will exaggerate in some way. And I always say, I've got to understand the range of exaggeration. It might just be presenting your best foot forward, but that can sometimes tip into big presenting things in a slightly misleading way, an over enthusiastic way. So I really like to sort of understand the reality of a business before I will get too passionate about it. And, it's so fashionable to say, get passionate about your business. And I always say, do your research first. And when you're
Okay.
absolutely convinced, get passionate.
Yeah. Do you expect people to come to you hoping that you will invest in them to understand the numbers and the potential for growth? Or do you think that's okay if they don't really know so much about that? What I want to see is that drive and a great idea. Or do you expect them to understand the margins, the cash flow, turnover, and the importance of getting all of that side right?
Well, I always say there's only three numbers that you really absolutely have to know: turnover, margin, net profit. And that is not, if anybody doesn't understand those, that's a complete turn off. Because actually, when you go about your everyday life in business, what I do understand is you kind of run a balance sheet. You kind of instinctively should know that makes money or that doesn't make money, or that's a cost that we're going to swallow because in the future it's going to make money. So you kind of got to have an understanding of the financial mechanics of a business if you're going to avoid making some big mistakes. Now, it's different when I invest in the den. I know I'm investing in some baby businesses, and therefore I understand that I can probably support them in some of those areas. But I don't expect to support them long term. I expect them to be able to learn. So I've got to see a glint of an understanding of how business works. However, at the other end of the scale, when I'm investing often outside of the den, sometimes inside of the den, and I'm investing in more sophisticated entrepreneurs, then I am absolutely expecting them to understand the levers and the mechanics of their business.
Okay. Yeah. Indeed. What is the sort of skill and expertise that you bring to those businesses? Is it the same every time? Is it contacts? Is it marketing? Is it just general business common sense and making them focus on the things that could go wrong?
I think what I'm really good at is getting a good nose for where the business is and what it needs. And it's often very different to what sometimes a founder or the inventor or the entrepreneur thinks. They tend to think that they're really good at something, and that can be sometimes wrong. So I think the first thing I do when I actually invest in a business, or even before I invest in a business, I actually go and meet them. I like to see them in their workplace and get a nose for what's actually needed for that business. So I think I'm very good at that. And then because I have good connections, then I bring in the right people to support them at the right time, because things change. I will bring in support maybe in the area of finance. And once that's all sorted out, maybe I need to bring somebody else in to help them in different areas. So I think I've got a pretty good nose. I've seen a lot of businesses. I've had my own, a lot of my own businesses. So I've got a pretty good nose for what is needed. And that's my job to support. The other thing I would say is I'm not there to stop businesses making mistakes, because actually often businesses, the most valuable thing they do is make a mistake, learn from it and move on. I'm there to stop them making catastrophic mistakes. If I actually see something that could threaten the business, it's
Yeah.
my job to stand in. But, I don't spend my life going, oh, don't do that, be careful. I just think a business has got to get on with its business life. But if I spot
Yeah.
something really big coming down the track, then I need to step in.
Okay. Just on that area of things going wrong, because obviously things will go wrong. Every investor ultimately can't expect 100% return from every company. With a listed company, it's very easy to make an exit. With a private company, you're obviously in it for the long haul. So what sort of red flags are you looking for with a small business that you've invested in that might make you think it's time for me to leave, it's not growing, or they've made a very poor decision, or they're managing the money very badly and they're not taking my advice? At what point
Well,
do you say enough is enough?
so the first thing I say is I always discuss exit right at the beginning. And it's a little bit of a red flag if they haven't thought about exit, because they're misunderstanding an investor. Investor is always saying, where and how do I get my return? And when you're talking about some of these private businesses, it's generally at a sale. So, often we start off with the intention of saying, well, actually, 3 to 5 year timescale, that's when we're going to exit. Of course, life doesn't work out like that. Successful businesses, I've had businesses that I've exited in 2 years, they've actually gone like mad. We've all been delighted with the result. We've all believed, well, actually, it's our time to cash in. Other businesses I can see are never going to get to their full potential. And that might simply be because I've got it wrong. I've got the market wrong. It's a perfectly good business, but it's really not going to go very far. It might be that I think that the entrepreneur can't take the business there. And sometimes I will, either sell back to the entrepreneur and I might make money on that, or I might just say, do you know what? We're really not going very far on this. So, here you are, buy my shares back. And very, very rarely when I've got it badly wrong, and usually that's because the personalities don't work. I've said this will happen a couple of times, but I've physically handed the shares back because life is too short, and to get grit under the eyelids, spend too much time in a tense situation with the people I've invested in, it's just not worth it. And I always say about investing, all you have to do is get more right than you get wrong. I'm never going to get nobody is going to get every investment right. Just get more right than you get wrong and you win.
Yeah, yeah. Also, don't fall in love with a poor performer and stick with it. Maybe there is a time to get out. Now, just the
Well,
current
that
economic...
is true.
Yeah,
That is very true. And I actually do think that's one of my strengths. Even it was when I was actually running my own businesses, I knew when to cut my losses. And it's very easy, particularly if you have follow-on money. If you've invested, and you've done several rounds and you've actually got a lot of cash in there, it's very easy to convince yourself it'll be all right. It'll be all right on the night. It'll be all right next time. It'll be all right next time. But you've got to recognize when actually something's gone wrong here.
yeah, yeah. Let's hope that's not going to be a problem that lots of businesses are going to be facing. But the fact is that the current economic environment is looking rather bleak. Inflation is running at 9 to 10%, and an economic slowdown or recession is definitely potentially on the cards. So how do you think businesses will be impacted? And is there anything that you think they should be doing to protect themselves from the worst of what lies ahead?
Well, it's interesting because I'm just going to glance back at the pandemic because, we went through a pandemic at the beginning of the pandemic. Every single business I was involved with panicked, oh, this is it. This is going to be the end. Of course, it wasn't. And businesses really quickly picked themselves up, began to understand the current landscape and flex their businesses accordingly. And then when they sort of came out the other end, every single one, I would say, ended up leaner and meaner and fitter and actually doing business in a very different way. So I think the key is always to be flexible, to keep your nose to the ground, to understand the mood of people and the worries about people, and make sure that your business speaks in a language and delivers whatever your product or your service is that makes it very, very good value, because people are going to be worried about their cash. There's going to be a shortage of cash going around. So be really aware, make sure that your business is relevant and helpful, and it is perceived as good value. And again, look at the way that that you do things. We can't just carry on doing the same old when the nation's mood has changed and their worries have changed. So, just look at the way that you do things and you present your business. And it's very easy just to put your head down and worry, when actually the winners my experience of the pandemic is that the businesses that were looking forward and saying, okay, not only are we dealing with the situation today, what is it going to look like into the future? They were the ones who won through, because they didn't get themselves, oh, woe is me. They were still
Yeah.
vibrant and alive and working on the way that they were presenting their businesses. And,
Yes.
they're the ones who have done well.
Indeed. Indeed. Let's move on to a subject talking about, how the world is changing and how it's changed a lot recently, a subject that is very close to your heart, and that's protecting the planet. ESG, which is environmental, social and governance, that's growing in importance for society and also for investors who now apply those factors to their investment choices. So, Deborah, as someone who's very environmentally aware, how do you marry this desire to protect and save the planet with helping businesses to grow and prosper, and the need to make a decent return on your capital?
Well, it's a really good question, because everybody asks that. They kind of feel that there's this big tension between making money and protecting the planet. But actually, it doesn't have to be so. First of all, there are huge sectors who are there are important and huge sectors who are actually going to do very well out of focus on climate change. The renewable sector and businesses we haven't even thought about yet are going to spring up, because we can't carry on going the way we are. So, I think there's a lot of opportunity in the whole green sector. But it is true that in the traditional businesses, it can be quite difficult sometimes to break out of the cycle. Now, a lot of the businesses that I work with, either historically or the businesses that I'm investing in at the moment, they have got green at their heart. And if I genuinely don't think I can help a business move towards being more sustainable, then that's one of my red flags, because I don't want to work within businesses that are just continuing on the hamster wheel of damaging the environment. And actually, when you stop and look at your businesses, there are often many things, quite simple things, that you can do to reduce your impact. And the most simple thing is to get it on the agenda, actually have it in the boardroom. What impact are we having? And constantly discuss it. And because actually, everybody sees this as a big problem, but it's a huge, it's an opportunity. And you can attract, if you want to attract good staff, then you really should be talking about, your reduced impact on the planet, all of your ESG stuff. It's not just tick box stuff. It's things that attract good people, because, the next generation, they're all over this stuff. So there's a load of opportunity. First thing I do with any business I get involved with, I want to really understand, do they genuinely buy into this, or are we tick boxing? Because if we're tick boxing, I'm not interested. But if there is a genuine desire to get better, get it onto the agenda, discuss it on a regular basis, take baby steps to start off with, see the difference you make. And that's like a snowball effect. The baby steps turn into giant steps. So, that's how I work with my businesses. And there is some amazing stuff going on at the moment. I interviewed Mark Versey, the CEO of Viva, the investment investment group, and they've got £260 billion invested, and they have pledged in 5 years to divest of anything connected to fossil fuel. I mean, that's big, and that's not 20
Yeah, it
years, that's
is.
5 years.
It
There's
is.
some amazing
Yes.
stuff going on.
Yeah. Now, you've said that you avoid fossil fuel and obviously any companies that spew out greenhouse gases. But how far do you take sustainability? Are you checking that any business that you invest in, that the supply chain is also meeting, your values? Or is it more about looking for businesses that are coming up with solutions to getting us nearer to a net zero world? And what types of businesses are those?
That is a really good question, because actually, checking on this, particularly for the SME businesses, it takes quite a lot of time to go right through your supply chain. And I would honestly say in most of my businesses, we are, and probably will be for quite a while, a work in progress. And again, with SMEs, sometimes their capacity means they can't tackle everything at once. And actually, it's not just SMEs, all businesses. At the end of the day, they're businesses, they have to make a profit, and they can't tackle everything in one fell swoop. So that as long as we're tackling enough and we're working from, the baby steps to start getting involved and getting motivated, to then working through the big things that fundamentally reduce impact in a major way. As long as they're discussing those and working on those, that is fine. One of the things I do also say is we do need to learn generally as a business community how to have a profitable business that stands still. And by that, I mean, it doesn't just look for growth year on year on year to be its raison d'etre, because actually most businesses have a size that they should be. And when you go beyond that, you start becoming hungry for resource, because you have to work really hard to get the next bit of the market. And we haven't somehow cracked it. We haven't somehow learned how we say, actually, we can stand still. We can still keep ourselves relevant because we're going to be innovative and we're going to be exciting and we're going to change our model ever so slightly. But we're still going to hold on to the core of what we do. We haven't learned to do that. And that is a very important step, because every time we do something, every time we make something, it has planetary impact.
It does. So are you saying then that we all have to, that the reality is that if we want to save the planet, we have to accept lower returns? And this is going to be a message that's going out at a time when inflation is so high. It may be a difficult concept to sell. I mean, there's already conflict in the financial services industry between fund managers who believe that their role is to maximize the returns for people who are building up a pension pot, for example. But are you saying then that we should, if the average annual return in the stock market over the long term has been maybe 8 up to 10%, do you think that's just going to be impossible going forward?
Well, what I do think is we need to start measuring returns in more than just cash. And I've said for many years, the profit of a business for me is the desired outcome, whether it be cash, whether it be creating jobs, whether it be reducing your impact on the planet, whatever it is, whatever your values are, you need to throw those into the pot. Now, that's difficult if your investors are still saying, look, at the end of the day, when I retire, I want to have a big pot of cash. But I think we're beginning to join the dots a little bit more about not just the impact on your life, but also, people with children, people with grandchildren are beginning to understand that if I might make a very high cash return on my investments now, it's actually going to be at the expense of my children or my grandchildren going forward, who are going to have to pay for all of this. All of the benefits that I'm getting now, they're going to have to pay because the planet's going to be screwed later down the line. So I think that the language needs to start joining all of the other benefits of your investments in with cash. Am I okay to accept a slightly lower return that will still give me a good retirement, but actually will also benefit future generations? Am I happy to do that? And I'd like to think, human beings are amazing. And if we can get our head around that, and we genuinely mean that, then we can make a massive difference. We can hit the net zero targets that we're going for if we really put our mind to it.
Yeah. There's no question the direction of travel is definitely in favour of sustainability. It's inevitable, and consumers want to see businesses taking that responsibility seriously. And if they don't, then there's going to be a cost in terms of the cost of capital and insurance and so on. So, that's where we're going. So if profit isn't just about cash, or say the purpose of a business isn't just about cash, and it's about also making the world a better place and a safer place in the future, do you welcome the changes that have come about from the pandemic, such as hybrid working or employees working from home full time? Do you see that as being helpful or harmful to businesses?
I think it's different across different sectors. So I think there are definitely sectors where working from home is better. It's fine. It's absolutely fantastic. personally, I think that it's good to have touch points, otherwise you just become a disparate group of people doing your own thing at home. So I think certainly I work from home an awful lot more. But I do also say to businesses, I think we need to get in front of each other now, because it is a different thing communicating through a screen to actually everybody being in a room, reading body language, feeding off each other in a slightly different way. So I absolutely embrace the whole working from home issue, but I do also design into all of the businesses I'm involved in, right, we need to get together on a reasonably regular basis just to make sure that we feel part of something, and we still have those relationships that would traditionally have been formed in the office. But I certainly think I don't have this fear that I hear, I'm afraid, from some pretty traditional businesses that, everybody's got to get back into the office and carry on the way we were. Quite the contrary. Everybody needs to get out of their offices and change the way they work.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think hybrid is actually really valuable and it's a wonderful way to work. But I wonder, one of the stories that has emerged from the pandemic is that is potentially a harmful development to women in the workplace. Typically, childcare, household duties tend to fall on their shoulders, and spending more time at home could be something that destroys their career prospects. Do you see that as a risk?
Well, that's interesting, because I would think exactly the opposite. I would have thought it gives women much greater flexibility to be able to do their work around the things that, that they do maybe traditionally in the home. I mean, I don't have children, so I'm kind of guessing, but that's counterintuitive to me. It surely is more flexible to be able to carry out your work as long as you're disciplined about it. And actually, I mean, this is another big topic, but it's one I'm very interested in. Housing needs to embrace the whole working at home culture, because it is difficult if you're trying to work on the kitchen table and there's a load of stuff going on. But actually, if we start to design into housing stock, areas to actually work so people can work from home, I would have thought it was a huge advantage. And we just have to, I think, we have to accept flexibility. Otherwise, we lose a massive force of talent, amazing people not being able to work because they can't fit it in around their family commitments.
Yeah.
So no, I think it's a benefit. I don't
Yes.
get that at all.
Okay, that's good. That's very positive. I've also read stories it seems to be encouraging people to come up with great new business ideas. I wondered if you had any advice to give to people who have an idea and are interested in building up a business around it. The FT innovation editor, John Thornhill, he wrote a piece recently because he has set up his own business, and he mentioned that meeting potential investors, he was told, was rather like undergoing a body cavity search by someone with a faulty knowledge of anatomy. That was how meeting a venture capitalist was described to him. So how would you help someone feel a bit more comfortable, or how would you recommend they go in to meet the venture capitalist when they're seeking funding?
So the thing that I need more than anything else from anybody who is pitching to me is I need to feel like I'm getting a genuine and real picture. And that means it doesn't have to be pitch perfect. Please don't memorize what you're going to say, because if you forget or get knocked off course, you spend hours, it all falls apart. So don't, know what you want to say, but also go in with the confidence and the knowledge that you know what you're talking about so well that I don't have to memorize it, because whatever question comes at me, I've got it. I completely understand the answer. Spend enough time talking about the market and to have enough information to be able to explain why there is a market to me or to the investor. Again, it just goes back to your reason to be. What are you better at? Is it because a lot of things are not brand new ideas. They're just an idea that's done better or has moved on a step. So just be able to explain what is your better and what is your reason to be, but please don't over rehearse. And I know that sounds mad, but I just see that so often. They know exactly what they're going to say, and then I ask a question that they hadn't anticipated, and the whole thing just goes, So just know your stuff. Just know your stuff and be yourself. And if you flop it or you stumble over your lines, doesn't matter. I don't care. I'm a human being. I get that. I understand that. I just want to believe that you know your stuff.
Deborah, that's great advice. Really good words of wisdom there. Deborah, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you today. I could happily carry on for another hour or so. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts and giving us your time today.
No, Rosie, thank you for inviting me. I've thoroughly enjoyed it.